What does it look like when denial collides with truth? In 1945, captured German soldiers were forced to watch footage of the liberated concentration camps. As the horrors of Auschwitz, Dachau, and Bergen-Belsen flickered across the screen, many covered their faces in shock. Others sat frozen in silence. These were men who had once fought for the Reich, now confronted with the crimes committed in its name. This haunting photograph captures not just disbelief, but the moment when propaganda shattered under the weight of reality. History's darkest truths could no longer be denied. They were staring them in the face. What does defiance look like? In 1964, inside a courthouse in Clinton, Louisiana, a black man stepped out of a bathroom marked "White Men Only." At the height of Jim Crow segregation, this simple act carried enormous risk, humiliation, arrest, even violence. Yet, it was also an act of quiet rebellion, a refusal to bow to laws designed to strip away dignity. This photograph freezes that moment. One man, one choice, standing against an entire system of oppression. It's a reminder that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's a silent step through the wrong door into history. Power and contradiction captured in smoke. This photograph shows President John F. Kennedy enjoying a cigar in 1962, just hours before history took a sharp turn. Knowing he would soon sign the embargo banning all Cuban imports, Kennedy ordered 1,200 Cuban cigars for himself, securing luxury before cutting it off from the nation. The move would ignite decades of tension between the U.S. and Cuba, shaping Cold War politics for generations. This image isn't just a portrait of a president. It's a snapshot of irony, privilege, and the quiet contradictions that often hide behind the world's most powerful decisions. This was the night technology felt like rock and roll. In 1995, crowds lined up at midnight in Sydney, Australia, to get their hands on Microsoft's brand new Windows 95. For millions, it wasn't just software, it was a doorway into the future. With its start menu, taskbar, and plug-and-play magic, Windows 95 changed how people use computers forever. This man, grinning and waving 2 copies in the air, captured the frenzy of the launch, a moment when owning a box of floppy disks felt like holding the future. It was more than a product, it was the dawn of a digital revolution. This isn't Berlin, it's New York City. In February 1939, more than 20,000 people gathered at Madison Square Garden for a Nazi rally, just months before World War II began. Beneath the towering image of George Washington flanked by swastika-like symbols, speakers praised Hitler and called for an American fascist movement. Outside, protesters clashed with police, horrified that such a display could happen on U.S. soil. This photograph captures a moment often forgotten, when Nazi ideology tried to plant its flag in America, and the unsettling reminder that extremism doesn't always come from abroad, it can rise from within. Before search engines, this was how you found answers. In the 1970s, students like the one in this photo would spend hours flipping through card catalogs, rows upon rows of tiny drawers, each holding index cards that led to books, journals, and knowledge. It was slow, meticulous, and required patience, but it was the gateway to learning in an analog world. Today, we type a question into Google and get millions of results in seconds. This photograph captures the prehistoric version of searching, a reminder of how far we've come and how much effort once went into a single answer. One place, two realities. In April 1945, the town square of Ilsen, Germany, was a battlefield. Flames consumed the buildings, smoke choked the air, and soldiers crawled behind cover, fighting for survival as the war neared its brutal end. Today, the same square is calm. Shops, trees, and quiet streets replace the chaos. This striking photo overlay bridges past and present, reminding us how places carry invisible scars. What was once terror and destruction is now ordinary life. It's a haunting contrast, proof that history lives not just in books, but in the very ground we walk on every day. Before the towers, the fame, and the presidency, there was simply a man in love. This rare photo from 1977 shows a young Donald Trump with his first wife, Ivana, carefree on the beach, years before their names would dominate headlines. They look like any young couple, laughing, dreaming, unaware of how their future would become entwined with wealth, scandal, and politics. In this frozen moment, there's no empire, no controversies, only the beginning of a story that would ripple across business, media, and eventually the White House. A reminder that even the most public figures start with private moments. Would you risk your life for science? In 1900, American physician Jesse William Laser did exactly that. At a time when yellow fever was devastating populations, Laser believed mosquitoes were the carriers, but proof was elusive. To confirm his theory, he deliberately let an infected mosquito bite him. 17 days later, he was dead. His sacrifice, however, gave the world the evidence it needed to fight the disease and save countless lives. This portrait isn't just of a doctor. It's of a man who wagered everything on a single bite, and whose death became one of medicine's greatest breakthroughs. What does fear look like on a sunny beach? In December 1941, just after Pearl Harbor, Chinese-American waitress Ruth Lee sat with a flag of China beside her chair, not for pride, but for survival. Anti-Japanese hatred was exploding across the United States, and many Asian Americans became targets of harassment and violence, regardless of their heritage. To protect herself, Ruth displayed the flag to make one thing clear: she was not Japanese. This haunting photograph shows how war's prejudice reached far beyond the battlefield, forcing ordinary people to defend their very identity in the face of blind hate. Imagine opening your yearbook in 1964 and realizing everyone looks exactly the same. This page from Delta Epsilon Phi sorority feels less like a college yearbook and more like a government cloning experiment. The same hairstyle, the same glasses, the same smile. It's like they all walked into the same beauty salon and said, "I'll have the usual." Without name tags, finding your best friend here would be like playing Where's Waldo? In black and white. It's funny, but it also perfectly captures an era where style wasn't about standing out. It was about fitting in all together. Forget seatbelts, helmets, or safety bars. This was the 1960s, and apparently the only thing keeping you alive was your sense of balance. This photo shows a mother and child riding the Snow King chairlift in Wyoming, dangling hundreds of feet over the town with nothing but gravity waiting below. No harness, no restraints, just pure trust in a rusty red chair. And look at their smiles. They weren't terrified. They were having the time of their lives. Today, we'd call this a lawsuit waiting to happen, but back then, it was just another thrilling family outing in the name of fun. What if a simple cup of coffee could freeze time? This rare photograph, taken in Jerusalem between 1910 and 1920, shows a group of Palestinian women gathered around a table, sipping coffee in quiet elegance. Their expressions carry both strength and serenity, a glimpse into daily life in a land already layered with history and conflict. In their posture, in the way they hold their cups, you see more than just tradition. You see identity, resilience, and a culture deeply rooted in hospitality. This isn't just coffee. It's a moment of peace, preserved forever, against the backdrop of a changing world. What looks like a scene from a sci-fi movie was actually just typing class in the 1960s. To make sure students memorized the keys without peeking, they were forced to wear these giant paper hoods, turning an ordinary classroom into something straight out of a dystopian experiment. Each clunky typewriter echoed through the room as students tapped blindly, training muscle memory that would last a lifetime. It seems absurd today, but back then, typing wasn't just a skill. It was survival in a world before computers. This bizarre photo reminds us how far learning technology has come, and how strange it once was. Snow in Jerusalem? It sounds impossible, yet this rare photograph from 1921 captures the holy city blanketed in white. A young boy stands proudly beside an igloo-like snow hut, his wooden sled at his side, while minarets and stone walls rise in the background. For a city more often associated with desert heat and ancient stone, this scene feels almost magical, an extraordinary clash of history, faith, and weather. In that moment, Jerusalem wasn't just a crossroads of empires and religions. It was a playground where children laughed in the snow and history briefly paused under a quiet, frozen sky. Blindfolded, bound, and moments from death. This haunting photograph captures Lieutenant Colonel Intoing Shamsuri at the execution pole in 1967. Just 2 years earlier, Indonesia was shaken by a failed coup linked to communists, an event that spiraled into one of the bloodiest anti-communist purges of the 20th century. Shamsuri, a leader in the rebellion, now stood powerless before the firing squad, his fate sealed by shifting tides of power. Behind this image lies not just one man's final moment, but the brutal story of a nation torn apart by ideology, fear, and the ruthless consequences of political failure. Two widows, bound by grief, meeting in a moment history will never forget. This photograph shows former First Lady Jackie Kennedy offering condolences to Coretta Scott King at the funeral of Martin Luther King Jr., April 9, 1968. Just 5 years earlier, Jackie had endured her own unimaginable loss with the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Now, she stood face to face with another woman carrying the same unbearable weight. Their clasped hands speak louder than words, an image of shared sorrow, resilience, and the silent strength of women who became symbols of dignity in the wake of tragedy. A queen who ruled an empire, yet rarely revealed a smile. This photograph is one of the only known images of Queen Victoria looking genuinely happy, taken in 1897. History often paints her as stern, humorless, and defined by the phrase, "We are not amused." But those who knew her best spoke of a woman with a sharp wit and a surprising sense of humor. In this fleeting moment, caught on camera near the end of her reign, Victoria appears not as the untouchable monarch of the British Empire, but as a grandmother, a woman, and, at last, simply human. Before email, before instant messaging, offices had their own version of fast delivery, and it came on 4 wheels. In the 1940s, some companies used roller skating messengers to speed documents across massive office floors. Imagine the clatter of typewriters, the hum of machines, and suddenly, someone whizzing by with urgent papers in hand. It was efficient, bold, and just a little chaotic. Long before Silicon Valley tried beanbags and scooters, these skaters brought a mix of energy and innovation to the workplace, proving that even in the age of black and white photos, office life had its share of flair.